man, say man. It's the one and only Jamaica man back here with the 13th overall quick break for you and me. Not to shake the storyline that we have from high school to the pros, but to let you know that just not anything goes. We'll start with high school. Monteverde Academy out of Florida took on Camden High School out of New Jersey. This was brought to you by ESPN Next, and it showcased the legacy of DJ Wagner, a fellow Cleveland Cavalier. Right before LeBron got there, he was a first-round draft pick out of in 2001, and he was pretty talented because he was one of the only high school players, I believe, to score 100 points in a game. Well, his son now plays at Camden High School, and they took on Derek Whitehead, Sky Clark, and as well as Dylan Mitchell out Monteverde Academy. Camden is a half-court team compared to this very talented Monteverde team, but they had their bright spots up until about the third quarter, where the game was blown out, and what you saw was Monteverde playing their particular style of basketball, where they keep you moving fast. And they took the ball out of DJ's hands, but I want to point a special shout out to Aaron Bradshaw. He held it together for Camden High School and had very good touches in the post. When they were able to stop the ball and place it in the half court, Camden had an advantage, but it wasn't too much of an advantage because Derek Whitehead was being able to make shots. Sky was able to facilitate off the dribble, and Dylan was doing everything that you could in the paint to just be too much for Camden High School. Moving forward, in college basketball, the Lady Gamecocks took on the Lady Wildcats of Kentucky. South Carolina took on Kentucky this week, and South Carolina dominated, although the SEC is very, very physical and arguably one of the best conferences in the NCAA. South Carolina was able to dominate, followed by Aaliyah Boston's 18 and 15 rebounds, 18 points, 15 rebounds, and it was just too much as South Carolina beat Kentucky by 20, 74-54. Moving forward into men's college basketball, I would like to point out our first prospect or next prospect that we are going to speak about since Jaden Ivey and Benedict Matherin. We'll focus on Mike Miles in the TCU, I believe that is Horned Frogs versus the Baylor Bears. Now, in the first half of that game, Mike Miles looked like the best player on the floor simply because he provided something that you did not see in the Big 12 or in college today, a lot of ISO scoring and knowing when to score as an individual player in a secondary and fast break. But Baylor played very physical, and about halfway through the second half, Mike Miles had hurt his wrist. But he finished with 26 points in the game, 5 assists if I'm not mistaken. But as I said, Baylor had the stoicness of a Summer League NBA team, and they still carried that through against TCU. They dealt with the run that was driven by Mike Miles and his ability to score with either hand, put you on the island, attack you off the dribble. If he did not close out, he would score, and that is someone that I would say Mike Miles out of TCU you should watch going forward into this NBA draft process. Now, I don't know ideally where he would rank in that process. I would not be superlative and say that he would be a top 10 prospect, but his skill set is top 10 for sure, but his measurables are top 25 at best. Respect to TCU, valued effort. The TCU Longhorns lost 76-64 as Baylor held it together, made shots at the rim and away from the rim for three to close it out. Then later that week, Baylor played Texas Tech. And in this Big 12 conference, it was much more of the same, where TCU didn't lack confidence to compete. They just were not deep enough to be able to compete with the length and defensive presence of Baylor collectively, which facilitated open shots. In this game, Baylor was matched with Texas Tech man for man, grit for grit, and it came down to the wire, and it was a great officiated game by the officials. They did not allow for any calls to dictate the flow of the game. Any particular questionable possessions was played in a timely manner to finish strong, but Texas Tech pulled it out because they were able to dominate a little bit more than Baylor, and the deficiency that I referenced in the first game against TCU showed through in this game. Because Baylor did not have that one player that can score when you needed to in ISO, it held them accountable to the fact that Texas Tech made a little bit more shots than they did, and they came out on top. Now, that'll be a game that I would like to watch again come conference tournament time. Moving forward, in the NBA, Golden State Warriors had Memphis this week. And I like what I saw in that game, particularly because Golden State was still at high power. They were without Draymond Green, but it showcased the athleticism and skill set of Memphis as a team. Driven by Ja Morant, his athleticism, his ability to stretch the defense with his penetration and ball handling, something that is rare, but last seen in 2016 with LeBron James being such an athlete. Going into Game 5, Draymond Green was suspended, and he was able to take advantage of the lack thereof defensive presence and soundness that Golden State has when Draymond is on the floor. You saw some of that against Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies, where they did not necessarily know in all ways to stop the backdoor cut of Ja Morant, the Iverson cut of Ja Morant, the floor spacing of not Dylan Brooks, but Desmond Bane, and the ability for Memphis to be more athletic in the forward spot as well as the guard spot allow for Golden State to be stretched thin. And if you think of a shell defense, imagine that shell being stretched or broken by the foot or penetration of Ja Morant. Now, I would love to see that going forward in the playoffs, if you will. I don't know if they make it to a Western Conference Finals matchup, but a second round matchup would be very, very entertaining to watch. I believe that Golden State would still beat Memphis, but they show you the only way that you can beat a very, very talented and defensively stout team in Golden State and their offense is to make them play defense to the point that they cannot stop the length and athleticism of your opponent. LeBron showed you that in 2016, and Ja reminds you of that in an Iverson-like fashion this week. Next, Brooklyn had Chicago, and this is their second time meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Brooklyn this time around blew out the Bulls with very good defensive effort that I show in my story at Jamaican Man online on Instagram. All of the games that I speak of, I have my moments that I felt like stood out to describe what I've described thus far in the matchups. But in this particular East Coast matchup, there was two things that stood out to me. Of course, Brooklyn is able to score whenever they want, however they want on the perimeter when it comes to having Kevin Durant orchestrate so many scoring options off of his ability to score at the free throw line. Where Kyrie has returned, it seems like they have an inverse arrow or diamond situation here, where the point of the diamond here at the bottom would be Kevin Durant at the elbow, and the two corners here and here would be to my right, which would be your left, would be Kyrie Irving being able to attack with his left hand, which is his strong hand as a ball handler, and James Harden is able to spot up with his right hand, which is stronger. Then he would be able to penetrate left, going baseline to score on the left side of the wing. That is pretty unstoppable when they're in their set, if you will. And the big, Deron Sharp, I spoke about him on my podcast as one of the most valuable rookies to come into the NBA this year, and he showed that true. A lot of commentators have noticed it, and they spoke to his ability to play more minutes going forward while Nicholas Claxton is going through health and safety protocol. I wouldn't want you to pay attention to the score of the first Brooklyn versus Bulls matchup or the second one. Just know that the Bulls' interchangeability from guard to forward position, they could play anyone, anywhere throughout that entire roster besides Vucevic in the post and maybe Lonzo Ball at the point guard position being the most solid positions that they have. But the depth that continues with Caruso, Kobe White as well, Troy Brown, formerly of the Washington Wizards, played very well. Contrary to the outcome of the score, he has grown stronger, and his ability to hit that short corner three-point shot and ability to get to the glass and play the four makes them very, very interesting to watch going forward, because the Bulls can change and be dynamic, if you will, as the Nets or Warriors or Memphis, with Memphis athleticism, Golden State offense, and Draymond leading the defense. Brooklyn's ability to be dynamic with the three players, as I described, in this fashion, that diamond fashion from the elbow to the wings, if you will. The Bulls can swap out players from the 2 to the 4, and they contribute in different ways while still playing hard, attacking the glass, and knowing how they want to score. And those are the dynamic things that a team at the top of the East and the West or the NBA would be able to set themselves apart from teams that are pieces away or just too young, if you will, with experience to be able to move forward. Speaking of Ja Morant, I think it's safe to say that he is Allen Iverson 2.0. I mentioned to how he is effective without actually catching and shooting the ball, similar to Iverson. Iverson having the ability to attack off the dribble or in open space as a cutter is exemplified with Ja Morant today. But where the game evolves between Allen Iverson and Ja Morant is Ja Morant's athleticism. Allen Iverson was very athletic for the time in which he played as a two-star athlete from Virginia, playing football and basketball and dominating both as a point guard, a quarterback, and a cornerback, if you will. Ja Morant has similar athleticism, but it's 4 times as strong, with the ability to not have to rely on a jump shot, but attack the defense in a LeBron-type fashion, but in a athletic ballerina type of way. Being able to change speed off the bounce, off the dribble, off the gather, being able to finish among anyone, and if you give him so much space, it's off with your head as it goes in the basket with Ja's slam dunk. I think it's okay to say that. I believe that Memphis has designed their team similar to the Philadelphia 76ers of championship contending old, where you had Iverson surrounded by not only defensively minded players, but athletes. If you will, Dikembe was on the decline at that time, but he was athletically able to defend not just the front of the rim, but the weak side parts with his shot blocking ability. He had assistance by the big guard, similar to Desmond Bane and Dylan Brooks and Aaron McKee. You also had Tyrone Hill and Jerome James, big forwards, George Lynch as well, big forwards that could hit the jump shot, and you would be able to guard your other defender, other player, by having switches wherever you see fit. And Trey Jones would be Eric Snow today. So I see what they're doing there. I'm not sure if this team would be something to surmount Golden State, but there's not too many teams in their way. I don't think Phoenix is a team that they would be like, well, it's better. I think it will be neck and neck because they're dynamic in different ways. But the class of the West is still the Golden State Warriors. But you have to understand that Memphis is putting everyone that doubts them on notice. Secondly, in my topic section, does Russell Westbrook have a problem? I've seen the slander all week. Sacramento in the Golden One Center is on record this week for placing the Ice Cold Player of the Week and giving that to Russell Westbrook. And I will not lie, he is having a bad week of basketball. But these claims, as he has spoken about, has been something that has been against or projected onto him for 14 years. So 2 things are certain. Russell Westbrook is not changing the way that he plays the game. And secondly, there has been a time where his skill set has complemented players around him. That does mean that the ball is in his hands, but I don't necessarily mean or think that Russell Westbrook can necessarily be denied that he can play off the ball. Now, on the wing, is going to be very difficult because it takes away his attacking abilities, and his slashing abilities is quality, but it's not his preference, if you will. I still believe if you place him in that short corner, and since AD is on record for not wanting to be the most physical player in the front of the rim, well, you have that weak side short corner that you can place him in, or dunker spot, if you will. You will have to consider placing him there to be able to make more effect of him being at the rim closer, if you will, instead of not giving him the ball to create his momentum himself. If you're not going to give him the ball when he's slashing, if you don't want him to spot up, the next best thing is to get him close to the rim fast. And you saw this with Giannis in the championship last year in Game 6 and 7, where they took the ball out of his hands completely but made him a threat in the post by allowing him to dive from the rim to the mid-post. In this case, I would like for Russell Westbrook to dive from the short corner to the dunker spot, or the dunker spot to the rim. And in that way, you diversify his ability to rebound and facilitate breaks on the other end, where he's far more dominant than he is actually catching the ball and shooting the ball or scoring in isolations. His isolations are more post up, short corner will serve that purpose, the block will serve that purpose, but his ability to shoot should come in spurts, which has always been that. His three-point attempts should not be as high as most other guards are, because that's not his game. But if he shoots a shot from the short corner, the likeliness of him scoring that shot increases tremendously. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Russell Westbrook per se. I just think as players go in and out, his need to contribute changes in and night in and night out, because he has to have the ball some nights at some certain points of the game, and then some nights he does not have the ball as much. So he's adjusting through that as he has spoken to. But please understand that what you have seen for 14 years is what you are getting for the remainder of his career, and the cause to have him traded or bad things happening to him is uncalled for. Please understand that I believe at this time, if there are no trades on the table and you're keeping him in Los Angeles, it is up to Frank Vogel to understand what I just explained and use Russell Westbrook correctly, regardless of who's on the roster at that time. Lastly, before we conclude with this very, very poignant quick break, I want to speak more to the 2022 draft class. I spoke about particular players, 3 thus far that I've highlighted, in Jaden Ivey, Benedict Mathurin, and now Mike Miles. It's a reason why I pulled those particular players out of the fray of players that may have the height, that may have the skill set even. But I don't think that beyond those 2 measurable items, the dynamicness of this draft is very high. And some people would translate that as it being weak, but it's not weak at all. These players are quality. 1 through 30, 30 through 60 have the ability to add value next year. The thing is as far as impact is concerned, I believe the top 3 candidates besides Jaden Ivey, in my opinion, you would bring them into your franchise, and you would have to, as usual, give them time to become an impact player, similar to what you have seen in Cade Cunningham. But we can argue that Jalen Green of the Houston Rockets was more impactful sooner. And I've said this previously, but the reason why I'm mentioning that is because Jalen Green brought a dynamicness that started with his athleticism, and you had questions about his jump shots. But you did not question his ability to score before he suited up as an NBA player. You don't question Jaden Ivey's ability to score. You question his ability to shoot jump shots before this season. That was a freshman year question. The sophomore year question is answered. He can shoot. His range is well out into 32 feet, and his ability to attack the defense with his ball handling, like Mike Miles and like Benedict Mathurin, sets them apart from a very skilled Jabari Smith or a Johnny Davis, or even a Pau Banchero, I believe is his name, where they have these measurables of either 6'10" in Jabari Smith or Paolo, 240 in Paolo, a very, very Kerry Kittles-like jump shot in Jabari Smith. But they have to figure out how to do those skilled things against athletes at the next level. And if you're drafting these players, Chet as well, with his deficiency as not necessarily being physical, can Chet shoot well enough like a Kevin Durant eventually is doing now, but day one, can he get that shot off against the physicality of the NBA players while being able to defend side to side and move up and down in such a quick manner that you have to adjust to a 14-second shot clock? Ben, Mike Miles, for example, and Jaden, they're going to attack you, and they're not going to need that much time to do what they need to do. If you're willing to wait on these players, right, go for it. But I wouldn't call this class weak. I would call this class a very skilled, a very measurable class, but you're not sure how much impact comes from this class right away. You have a few players that you could pick apart to add to that value, but you're not necessarily certain that, or you can't guarantee that these players come in and impact the game as 15 to 20 point scores right away. The reason why I'm stressing this is because you have the Memphis Grizzlies, for example, that most of their roster hasn't completed their rookie deals. So it's no longer the ability to be like, well, this player needs time and we have time for them to do that. You really don't. Because what you draft can change your franchise into a playoff competitor now more than ever. With just the dynamicness of a LaMelo Ball, for example, or a Ja Morant. You know that these guys add value in their box office. That's what you're looking for when you draft in the lottery. It makes sense. You can sell tickets, and if their skill set translates, while developing the things that make you an NBA player, the ability to shoot and read, because that's the only difference between each level. It gets faster and you have to read the game way more detailed the further you move along. Well, it's not that many players like that from what I've scouted thus far. Now, I'll continue to scout, but that is what makes this class what it is. So when you see, well, this guy is coming out of here, and shout out to Adrian Griffin too. He had a good game this week, but he wasn't starting the entire season. He was trying to find his way again. All of these players are skilled, but what sets the players apart in this particular class is how dynamic they can be. Thank you very much for your time. I wanted to be as pivotal with your time as possible. In all things considered, just understand that you are the best version of you, and you take what I left for you and keep the story going. And as always, it's in you, not on you. Be well. Till next time. Ism.